The year was 1823, and the Egyptian desert stretched endless and golden beneath the relentless sun. Sandstorms swept across the horizon like restless spirits, reshaping the dunes that had hidden secrets for millennia. To many, the sands were barren wastelands. But to Professor Alistair Cromwell, they were libraries of forgotten history. He had come to Egypt not as a conqueror, but as a seeker of truth, chasing rumors of a lost tomb whispered among Bedouins for generations. Alistair was a man of scholarly obsession, with weathered hands that bore ink stains as often as they bore calluses from excavation. His expedition was modest: a dozen hired workers, 2 fellow scholars, and a caravan of camels burdened with crates of supplies. Among them was Edmund Hall, a young assistant whose fascination with hieroglyphs was second only to his loyalty to the professor. Their destination lay several days west of Thebes, where a shepherd had once claimed to have fallen through the sands into a chamber of painted walls that by the 3rd week they uncovered something extraordinary, a line of ancient cut stone peeking through the desert like the edge of a buried temple. With every day of careful digging, more of it revealed itself a sloping passageway leading downward. The locals grew restless. They muttered that this was no ordinary tomb, but a prison sealed by priests of old. Their reluctance was not unfamiliar. Every tomb was said to be cursed. Still, the professor pressed onward, driven by the thrill of discovery. One dawn, as the first light painted the desert sky crimson, the expedition broke through into a hollow space. Dust billowed like the breath of an ancient beast as they lowered lanterns into the darkness. Alistair descended first, his boots striking stone untouched for thousands of years. His heart thundered. He raised his lantern high, and the shadows peeled away to reveal what no outsider had seen since the days of the pharaohs. The chamber was vast, its pillars carved with intricate hieroglyphs and painted figures of gods with falcon heads and jackal faces. Their painted eyes seemed to glisten in the flickering lantern glow. The air was thick, stale, yet carried a faint perfume of incense long faded. At the center of the room stood a sarcophagus, carved of sandstone, its lid shaped like a reclining. Figures shrouded in eternal slumber. Golden vessels and ornate jars surrounded it, offerings scattered as though abandoned in haste. But most striking of all was the shaft of sunlight piercing through a circular opening in the ceiling. The light fell directly upon the sarcophagus, bathing it in an otherworldly glow. Alistair felt as though the heavens themselves marked the coffin, preserving it in a beam of eternity. Edmund whispered, his voice trembling, "It is as if Ra himself watches over the dead." Alistair nodded, but his gaze lingered not on the beauty, but on the warnings etched into the walls. Unlike other tombs where hieroglyphs told stories of glory, these carvings depicted torment figures bound by chains of flame, eyes lifted to cruel gods, souls weighed and condemned. One repeated symbol appeared again and again, a mask half golden, half shadowed. Beneath it, a single phrase in crude script: "He shall not rise, lest the world fall to darkness." The professor's pulse quickened. Tomb warnings were common, often designed to ward off thieves. But there was something different. Here, something unervingly deliberate. The symbols bore an urgency, a desperation, as though those who carved them truly feared what lay within. Despite this, Alistair felt the weight of opportunity. The discovery was unlike any other an untouched tomb, hidden away from history itself. The British Museum would immortalize his name, his peers would laud him, and the world would finally see him not merely as a scholar, but as a pioneer. They set camp within the antechamber, lanterns flickering as men scribbled notes and copied the carvings. Edmund sketched feverishly, marveling at the artistry. The hired workers, however, would not stay past sunset. By evening, only a skeleton crew remained with Alistair, their nerves fraying in the tomb's oppressive silence. That night, Alistair sat before the sarcophagus, lantern beside him, journal in hand. He traced the engravings with his eyes. The figure carved on the lid was not of a serene pharaoh, but of a man in torment, his features twisted as though even death had not freed him from suffering. Unlike other tombs where masks adorned the dead, in eternal calm, this one seemed carved in anguish. He dipped his pen and wrote, Day 21. We have uncovered a chamber, unlike any before. The sarcophagus rests beneath a deliberate shaft of light, as though the architects themselves sought to seal him in divine gaze. Inscriptions warn not of intruders, but of resurrection. It is my belief that this Pharaoh, whoever he may have been, was not revered but condemned. As his pen scratched across the page, a chill coursed through the chamber. The lantern flame trembled, though no breeze touched it. Alistair glanced around. Nothing stirred, yet he could not shake the sensation that unseen eyes watched from. The painted walls. He closed his journal, pressing it firmly shut, and extinguished the lantern. Before he slept, he gazed once more at the stone lid. The golden vessels reflected faint moonlight streaming through the shaft above, casting the sarcophagus in pale glow. In that light, for the briefest of moments, Alistair thought he saw the stone figure's mouth curve upward, not in pain, but in a knowing smile. He blinked, and the illusion was gone. Still, sleep did not come easily, for the professor could not silence the words etched into the wall. He shall not rise. Yet something within Alistair longed to defy it. The next morning, the desert sun rose like a burning coin above the dunes, but its light could not penetrate the oppressive gloom within the tomb. Alistair Cromwell awoke with a stiff back, the stone floor unforgiving, his mind heavy from dreams. He could not recall. Around him, the chamber was eerily quiet. Edmund sat nearby, sketching the hieroglyphs with meticulous care, while two workers prepared lamps for the day's work. The sarcophagus lay in the center, unchanged yet somehow more imposing in daylight. Dust motes swirled in the shaft of sun that poured down from the circular opening above, falling directly upon the coffin, as though heaven itself cast judgment upon the figure within. Edmund broke the silence. Professor, the inscriptions. They are unlike any I've studied. Look here. He beckoned to the wall, pointing to a carved sequence of figures. It depicts a pharaoh, yet he is not crowned. Instead, he kneels in chains before Anubis, his soul weighed against the feather of Maat. But the scales are shattered. No balance. No judgment. Alistair frowned, brushing dust from the symbols. Condemnation. This was no ordinary king. Whoever he was, he defied the order of gods and men alike. The workers whispered nervously. One, a gray-bearded man named Hassan, shook his head. This place is cursed. The priests sealed him so he would not walk again. You bring danger by staying. Alistair's jaw tightened. He had heard such warnings before at every dig site, but this chamber was different. Still, the thirst for knowledge burned hotter than fear. Superstition, he said firmly, though a tremor of doubt lingered in his chest. History will remember us for this. That afternoon, they set about documenting the sarcophagus. Alistair ordered careful sketches of its carvings, while Edmund recorded measurements. At last, unable to resist, Alistair gave the command to open it. The workers balked. Some refused outright, shouldering their packs and abandoning the site. In the end, only 3 remained, their eyes wide with dread. With crowbars and ropes, they worked the lid loose. The stone groaned in protest, dust cascading as though disturbed from centuries of slumber. When at last the cover shifted, a gust of stale air rushed forth, carrying with it the scent of resin, decay, and something unnameable like iron. Sharp and metallic dot, the lanterns flickered violently. One man crossed himself, muttering prayers, and there, within, lay the figure that had haunted their imaginations, a mummy wrapped in brittle linen blackened by time. Across its face rested a mask of gold, beaten thin but exquisitely wrought. Unlike the serene masks of Tutankhamun or Ramses, this visage bore eyes wide open, carved with unnatural precision. They were not blank or lifeless, but seemed to glisten, as though watching, waiting. Edmund swallowed hard. "Professor, it feels as if he is not dead." Alistair forced his voice steady. "Nonsense. It is but clever artistry, a trick of the craftsman." Yet he could not shake the weight of those golden eyes, boring into his very soul. They spent the rest of the day cataloging their find. Alistair noted the amulets clasped to the wrapping symbols of protection, but some inverted, their meanings twisted. The Pharaoh's hands were bound across his chest, not in reverence, but in restraint. Everything about the burial screamed of punishment rather than honor. As night fell, the tomb grew colder. The workers refused to remain underground, retreating to their tents beyond the dune. Only Alistair, Edmund, and a single lantern stayed within. They lit oil lamps along the chamber's walls, shadows dancing across painted gods who seemed to shift in the flicker. It was then that the whispers began. At first, faint, like the sighing of wind through stone. Then clearer low murmurs in a tongue neither Latin nor Arabic, yet heavy with meaning. Edmund froze, his quill shaking. "Did you hear that?" Alistair's blood ran cold, though he clenched his jaw. The acoustics of the chamber, nothing more. But as the hours dragged on, the whispers grew bolder. Twice the lamps sputtered out, plunging them into suffocating darkness. Edmund swore he saw hieroglyphs shimmer, their lines shifting as though alive. Unable to sleep, Alistair sat once more by the sarcophagus, journal in hand. He scribbled notes feverishly, each stroke of ink betraying his unease. The burial is unlike any other. The mask's eyes are not symbolic, but purposeful. It is as though they were crafted to see. Tonight the chamber groans, as though unsettled. I confess a disquiet I cannot rationalize. Near midnight, a scream split the silence. One of the workers outside, his voice cut short as if strangled. Edmund leapt to his feet, but Alistair held him back. "Stay close," he hissed. Together they crept toward the entrance. Outside, the desert was still. No wind, no movement. Yet their campfire smoldered unattended, its flames reduced to embers. Of the worker, no trace remained save for his overturned lantern in the sand. Shaken, they returned inside, bolting the passage with what stones they could muster. But as they entered the chamber once more, their hearts stopped, the sarcophagus empty. The mummy, which only hours before had lain bound within, was gone. Edmund stumbled back, his face pale. "Impossible. We never left the chamber unguarded, Professor." "It cannot be." Alistair's eyes darted across the room. The wrappings lay scattered across the stone floor, brittle strands trailing like shed skin. The golden mask, too, was missing. The very air felt charged, oppressive, as though the chamber itself held its breath. A low groan echoed through the hall. It was not the wind, nor shifting stone, but something heavier, something that moved. Lanterns quivered, shadows stretched. On the far wall, painted figures seemed to lean forward, their painted eyes following. Alistair's chest tightened. His rational mind clawed for explanation, yet none would come. Only one truth pulsed in the silence, undeniable as the heartbeat. Pounding in his ears, the Pharaoh was awake. The tomb no longer felt like a place of discovery. It was a prison one they had foolishly broken open. The air grew heavier with each passing hour, pressing against their chests as though the chamber itself sought to suffocate them. By dawn, the remaining workers had fled. Their tents lay abandoned outside, provisions half buried in sand. Only Alistair and Edmund remained, unwilling or perhaps unable to leave. Fear gnawed at them, but ambition, Curiosity and pride chained them tighter than any rope. They wandered. The tomb, seeking answers in its walls. Edmund traced a series of glyphs, half hidden behind a column, his voice trembling as he translated. The king who defied the gods was sealed alive, his soul cursed to wander. He shall drink from the vessel of the living and walk again. Alistair stiffened. Alive? You mean entombed breathing? Edmund's throat bobbed as he swallowed. It is possible. Some ancient punishments condemned rulers who practiced forbidden rites. He sought immortality, but the priests bound him instead. He gestured to another carving, a figure in flames reaching upward toward strange beings descending from the sky, neither gods nor men, but something in between. The professor's mind reeled. Not immortal, but awaiting release. And we. He broke off, his words strangled by the realization that they had become the key. That night, the whispers returned louder, closer. Alistair heard them not with his ears, but with the marrow of his bones. The words slithered through him, promising knowledge beyond comprehension, power beyond empires. He pressed his hands to his temples, fighting the pull. Across the chamber, Edmund crouched, rocking in fear. "Professor," he gasped, "it speaks in my head." The lamps sputtered, extinguished one by one, plunging them into blackness. The silence that followed was worse than sound, thick and suffocating. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy. They echoed from the far end of the chamber, though the darkness concealed their source. "Light!" Alistair shouted, fumbling with flint. A spark caught, flame leapt, and lantern glow revealed only emptiness. Yet the wrappings still trailed. Across the floor, leading away from the sarcophagus like the skin of a serpent. Suddenly, Edmund shrieked. He clutched his arm, blood seeping between his fingers as though unseen claws had raked him. Alistair dragged him back, heart hammering. The shadows moved again. No, not shadows, but a figure cloaked in them. For an instant, the lantern revealed. A glimpse, the golden mask gleaming, eyes glowing faintly from within. Then it was gone, swallowed by darkness. They barricaded themselves within a smaller chamber, stacking jars and broken slabs against the entrance. Edmund's wound festered. Quickly, the flesh around it darkening, veins blackening as though poisoned. He groaned in delirium, whispering words not his own. The vessel must be filled. Alistair tended him, though his own resolve began to fracture. He found himself staring at the golden mask whenever his mind wandered, imagining its cold weight upon his face, imagining what it might be like to see through those ancient eyes. 2 days passed in restless terror. Food dwindled, water dried, and still the Pharaoh prowled unseen. Waiting out in desperation, Alistair scoured the chamber for clues. His persistence was rewarded when he uncovered a niche hidden behind a panel of crumbling stone. Within lay a bundle of papyri sealed in resin. Carefully, he unrolled them. The text spoke of the Pharaoh, by name Neferhotep the Defier, a king who had turned from the gods of Egypt and sought counsel from beings beyond the stars. He had commanded rituals to fuse his soul with their essence, to walk as both man and God. The priests rebelled. His body could not be destroyed, but his soul could be bound. They sealed him in a tomb designed not as a sanctuary, but as a prison, guarded by sunlight from above to burn his spirit if he stirred. But the papyri also carried a darker warning. If freed, he shall seek the heart of man, to wear flesh anew. His host shall grant him eternity. Alistair's blood ran cold. A host. The Pharaoh was not searching for freedom alone. He was searching for a body. And who better than the man who had opened his prison? That night, Edmund's fever worsened. He raved in tongues, his eyes rolling back. "He comes, Professor. He comes for you." Then, with unnatural strength, Edmund lunged, seizing Alistair's throat. His voice was not his own when he spoke, but deep, resonant, layered as though 100 voices spoke through one. Your flesh will be my temple, your blood my passage. Alistair wrestled him back, slamming his assistant against the wall. Tears blurred his vision as Edmund's body convulsed, black veins spreading across his skin. With trembling hands, Alistair seized a bronze dagger from among the offerings and plunged it into his protégé's chest. Edmund gasped once, then fell silent, eyes glassy, his final expression a mix of agony and release. Alistair collapsed, dagger clattering to the stone. He had killed the one man he trusted, the one man who believed in him. But worse, he felt it then, a presence curling around him, seeping into the cracks of his grief and guilt. A whisper brushed his ear, seductive, irresistible. You cannot. Kill what is eternal. You are mine, Cromwell, my vessel, my mask. The golden visage glimmered in the dark, resting now atop the sarcophagus once more, as if waiting for him. Alistair knew the truth. The curse was real, the Pharaoh restless, and time running out. Either he would resist, or he would be consumed. Asterisk. The tomb trembled as though it were alive. Dust sifted from the ceiling, scattering across the golden vessels that now lay overturned. Their contents spilled like the offerings of a looted shrine. Professor Alistair Cromwell stood alone in the chamber, his breath ragged, his hands still stained with Edmund's blood. The silence pressed against him, heavy and expectant, broken only by the rhythmic pounding of his own heart. From the shadows, the whisper returned, no longer faint, but commanding. Cromwell, vessel of flesh, vessel of eternity. You cannot resist me. Alistair's lantern sputtered. In its unsteady glow, the golden mask shimmered, gleaming from atop the sarcophagus where it had reappeared. The empty eye sockets seemed to burn with a light out of this world. He staggered back, but there was nowhere to flee. The only exit lay blocked by fallen stone, sealed as though the desert itself conspired to trap him. He dropped to his knees, clutching his journal. His mind warred with itself, reason against madness, science against superstition. He had always believed curses to be tales spun by frightened workers, nothing more. Yet here he was, cornered by something older, darker, and hungrier than myth. He forced his trembling hands to turn the papyri once more. Among the faded lines, he had overlooked a final passage, marked by a symbol of Ra's son. When he rises, bind him with the light of the heavens and the blood of the willing. Only sacrifice can seal the defier. Alistair's breath hitched. Light and blood. His dot the chamber darkened as the whispers became a roar. From the far shadows, a figure emerged tall, shrouded in decayed wrappings, the golden mask fused to its face. Its movements were slow, deliberate, yet each step reverberated like thunder. Where its feet touched stone, the hieroglyphs themselves seemed to twist, their painted forms writhing in agony. Alistair backed toward the shaft of sunlight that pierced the ceiling. The beam still struck the sarcophagus, though faintly, weakened by the setting sun. You cannot have me, he shouted. Though his voice cracked with fear, the Pharaoh's figure halted, tilting its head, the golden mask gleaming. Then it spoke, not in whispers, but aloud, its voice deep and layered, as though thousands of souls cried out in unison. You woke me, Cromwell. You broke the seal. Now your flesh is mine. The lantern flame died. Darkness devoured the chamber. Save for the single shaft of light, the Pharaoh lunged. Alistair dove aside, grabbing the bronze dagger from where it had fallen. He slashed wildly, striking only air as the figure dissolved into shadow and reappeared behind him. Cold hands like iron clamped onto his shoulders. His body stiffened, veins burning as though molten lead poured into them. The mask drew closer. those eyes alive with hunger. Desperate, Alistair remembered the ritual words etched along the walls. His voice shook, but he began to chant, syllables guttural and harsh, scraping his throat as if they were not meant for mortal tongues. The Pharaoh recoiled, the grip loosening. The shadows writhed, shrieking in fury. Ra's light! Alistair gasped, dragging himself into the beam. The sunlight bathed him, searing hot upon his skin, but it drove the Pharaoh back, hissing, its form flickering between solid and smoke. The papyrus's words echoed in his mind. The blood of the willing dot, there was no other choice. He raised the dagger, staring at his reflection in its bronze blade. He thought of Edmund, of the men who had fled, of the endless sands outside. If he failed, the Pharaoh would rise, not as a legend, but as a god of living flesh. He drove the blade into his own chest. Pain exploded through him, blinding white. Blood poured down, staining the ancient stone. The Pharaoh screamed, a sound that shattered the silence like breaking worlds. Its form lunged for him, but the beam of sunlight caught them both. Alistair seized the mask with blood-slicked hands and pressed it to his own face. For an instant, the world dissolved. He stood not in the tomb, but in a vast hall of stars, galaxies. Wheeling above, the Pharaoh loomed before him, colossal, his eyes burning suns. "Fool," the voice thundered, "you cannot contain me." But Alistair, though racked with agony, stood tall. "If I cannot destroy you," he whispered, "then I will be your prison." The light of Ire blazed brighter, consuming them both. The Pharaoh's scream echoed. Across the void, his form unraveling into smoke, pulled inexorably into Alistair's bleeding chest. Agony flared, then silence. When the light faded, the tomb was still. The golden mask lay shattered on the floor, its once glorious face fractured into lifeless fragments. The sarcophagus had split, its lid crushed beneath fallen stone. And at the center of the chamber lay Alistair Cromwell, eyes closed, chest still, blood pooling around him. The tomb shuddered one final time before collapsing inward. Sand poured through the shaft above, filling the chamber, burying all beneath endless dunes. Epilogue years later, in 1861, a merchant in Cairo purchased a weathered leather journal from a wandering Bedouin. Its pages, though damaged by time, recounted the final expedition of Professor Alistair Cromwell. Scholars pored over the text, marveling at his accounts of a tomb. No map recorded dot, but the last pages were missing. The journal ended with a single unfinished line, written in a hand shaky with blood. He is bound. But if the sands shift and the light fades, beware. For the Pharaoh still. The sentence trailed into nothing. The ink smeared as though a hand had seized it mid-stroke. The merchant who had sold the journal swore he found it half buried in the desert, near dunes that shifted unnaturally, as though something beneath them stirred dot. And in the Cairo Museum, where relics lined glass cases, a broken shard of a golden mask rested unnoticed in the corner of a crate, its eyes faintly gleaming. In the dim light,